Aloha, I'm Lorraine Osako, and I am pleased to present to you the Vigilant AI 3 to 5 year cybersecurity plan for 2025. I've got a quick overview here of the table of contents that we'll discuss. And then as we move into the priorities that we'll have, I'll leave you a moment to read that to save time. And then the components of the IT governance cybersecurity frameworks is the strategic alignment to ensure that we are relevant to the goals of the business. The value delivery is to measure how relevant we are, and the risk assessment. It's for management and to identify and deal with threats by the equation of threat times vulnerability times consequence equals threat. And resource management for assets tracking, performance measurement to track how effective we are in thwarting threats, and policies, standards, and guidelines like the NIST cybersecurity framework to maintain alignment and documentation of threats and recovery. The procedures are to establish guidelines for workflow, incident response, to have documentation on how to handle incidents and threats and recovery. The controls are to protect digital assets and ensure compliance with standards while checking the pulse of the organization's attitude towards cybersecurity. The alignment and support of business objectives are actionable and measurable goals and objectives that have champions identified to ensure completion. These goals and objectives focus on assessing vulnerabilities, risk, and prioritize mitigation, adapting to new threats from artificial intelligence, creating a zero trust model. They're also designed to support our entity in planning for new technologies, navigating an ever-changing cybersecurity landscapes. So here is the pyramid that I wanted to sort of point out and explain in a little more detail. You'll see here the policies. They are the foundation that we build our cybersecurity structure upon. That's why it's the base. Then the standards. The standards are what we're going to actually implement. And then the controls are to go back and evaluate whether the standards are in compliant with the policies and do adhere to our business. Are they relevant to our business as well? And then the procedures then are the next step to make sure that we're doing all the things we need to be doing, and then we'll do it as per the guidelines. After we've set the guidelines up of exactly how to proceed, these are our guardrails, then we can go back to the technical control to evaluate whether or not the things that we are doing per the guidelines actually do adhere to our policies and procedures, but are they also relevant? And do they adhere to the policies that are mandated by governments? So the policy statement is to comply with laws and regulations, to maintain accurate asset inventory, to identify and classify assets, as well as set the security requirements and to manage the vulnerabilities and recovery. This is the basis of what we do. It defines our behaviors, and this is why it's important. The policy helps Vigilant AI remain compliant with GLBA and other laws that govern. The standards are how we are going to implement the policies. We're going to encrypt the data, the VPN for data in transit, and whole disk encryption for data at rest. We'll implement the multi-factor authentication and also asset management system through the Microsoft Suite. Using the NIST SP 800-53 Revision 5 for the information systems. So the control mitigates the risks identified by the organization after the adoption of the standards. We're going to create the multi-factor authentication for each device and application. We'll create the VPN, create security around the data at rest, and we're going to use a single log for asset management. And our procedure will be to create a team to manage the creation and adoption of a living framework, to implement multi-factor authentication for devices and appliances. Weekly cybersecurity pulse check with employees. This is very important. Then the pen testing with each patch upgrade. We will be involving the C-suite with the management activities overview of the cybersecurity team. We're going to also involve the AWS to handle the VPN environment. Our guidelines will be based on the ISO IEC 27002 to adopt the framework for guidelines to see where we are and what we need to do. The NIST also for the implementation of the framework to remain compliant with the ISO IEC 27002. And then back to the technical control to identify the issues after the guidelines or the guardrails are set in place. This is also to evaluate and implement any changes that was identified in the guidelines use. So training and exercise builds proficiency, assists personnel on what to expect in the case of an event, and training and exercise for each planned incident. This will help the team be more proficient if and when something were to happen. Whatever threat comes our way, our team will be prepared. These are the references that I would list really quick for you so that you can evaluate more. If you had more questions, you can always reach me here, or the ISO in 2025, the International Organization for Standardization, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. TechTarget has a lot of information on defining policies versus standards versus procedures versus control, and the CISA, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, Security Planning. This is a great workbook for how we can adopt these things. I hope this helps, and I look forward to spending more time with you. Aloha.